Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. I have some economic news, right, to update Trudeau's tweet about Africa yesterday. I thought it was an interesting way to go. Yeah, Canadians, you know who we've got to support? Africa. Africa. Man. Anyway, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. I send out a weekly newsletter just with the biggest stories of the week. And also, if YouTube decides to cut me off, that's what I'll use to let you know about show updates and things like that. Also, don't forget to check out the forum. It's quite a good place with robust conversation, and I haven't had a chance to go there this morning because I was busy at work. So, sorry. Sorry. Anyway, you should check it out. I'll be there later today. Here is some things that indicate maybe something's happening or maybe not. Somebody was saying, why do they build a fence around the parliament buildings? What's going on? And the second I looked at this, I was like, did you miss the scaffolding and the crane? So I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory or whatever's being said on the internet. But it appears that this is just a fancy looking wall that is temporary. It appears to be temporary. I don't think that's a permanent wall. It's just construction, right? Because they've got scaffolding around that, I don't know, tower or building, whatever, clock tower. So it seems like normal state of affairs to me. This seems outside of the normal, though. UCP, the United Conservative Party of Alberta, plans to use drones to spy on long weekend campers. They were going to use it to look for people who are camping on Crown land because they know that it's completely unpoliceable. They couldn't police it. They couldn't possibly do it. This plan has been canceled, by the way. This is no, this is not going to fly. This is not going to fly. Your Amazon package could be delivered to your coordinates of your smartphone in the bush. Lucky you. Yay, by drone. Oh. No. It is very interesting that this was the first instinct. The package delivery idea, I think, is pie in the sky. I don't think it's actually going to happen, despite the Super Bowl commercial from Amazon a few years back. I think that was 2017. But this idea seems like something that they would do and absolutely would do, except for probable backlash, public backlash, no, don't do this. But I think that it's a very interesting foreshadowing of where this kind of technology leads, right? Oh, we'll find the rule breakers. We'll find those lawbreakers and we'll collect our fine money, right? And everybody will agree that it was a genius idea. Yay, right? No. Ridiculous. Okay, Pierre Poilievre goes through inflation, and it's pretty effective. It's a pretty effective little talk that he's giving here. So we'll listen to it. And
in March 2020, a dollar bought you this. A year later, that same dollar bought you this. So in 1 year, you went from getting 3 feet of 2x4 to 1 foot. The difference is inflation. The price of everything is going up. Now, of course, lumber is an extreme example. Lumber prices have tripled and quadrupled depending on what product you use as your measurement. But the bottom line is that it's an important example. Lumber, for example, goes into housing. And when lumber goes up, housing gets more expensive. It also goes into packaging of large freight and industrial buildings that house and produce other goods. So when those infrastructure pieces go up, everything that is made and stored in them goes up as well. And it's not just lumber that's rising. Of course, we've seen increases in energy prices of approximately 20%. We've seen transportation costs rise 7%. Goods are up 5%. And the year ahead, food prices like meat and bakery are expected to go up about 5% as well. This is the result of the fact that the Trudeau government is running monstrous deficits and paying for it with printed money. They can't tax and borrow enough to do all their spending, so they're printing and creating new cash to do it. More money, chasing the same number of goods and services, drives up the price of everything. That's why I predicted a year ago we'd have inflation, and we do. Now, this week, the Statistics Canada will come out with the new inflation numbers. And all the experts who said we'd have no inflation will change their tune and say, okay, there is some inflation, but it will be transitory. And by that, they don't mean that at some future point after the transitory period is gone, that prices will go back down, but that the increases will stop piling on. Well, we'll
So the price won't go back to normal. You'll just get used to it, and that's that. And it'll stop going up, and then maybe we'll grow into it, or maybe you'll just be able to buy less. Here is Blacklock's reporter says, just because prices are up doesn't mean there's inflation, says ex-Bank of Canada governor. Prices must go up, 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 up. Now that's inflation. Here's the thing, though. Our dollar's going bananas, right? It's like 83 cents right now. And I thought, I wonder why that's happening. And usually when that happens, it's like on oil being oil earnings are up or whatever. Oil impacts the Canadian dollar in a very direct way. And so Canadian dollar increasing is usually tied to oil. But not this time. This time it seems that the Canadian dollar increasing is just a byproduct of the US dollar losing its value generally. Interesting, right? So, and that's Phil Rack saying, the loonie is, well, this is in response to the National Post says, the loonie is soaring and it isn't just an oil story. Phil Rack says, not an oil story. It's the simple fact that the US dollar has lost almost 5% of its value since April 1st. So I'm not a money finance guy. So I'm not going to get into that. I don't know the finer points of that. But I think that it's interesting to note in line with the inflation story. I think that is something that bears looking at, bears thinking about what the consequences of this particular set of circumstances are for us. What does the next 6 months look like? What does the next year look like? Are food prices going to stop at 5% for bakery and other like meats, or is it going to be much more expensive than that? Are we looking at a hyperinflation situation, which nobody wants, right? And nobody wants, those are scary words, right? Ooh, hyperinflation, we don't want that. Nobody wants that, right? Because that's bad news for everybody. So what's happening here, right? What's happening here with the money? And I would love a smart finance person to come and explain what this could do over the next 6 months to a year. Because I think looking out further than that is, how do you plan for that? You can do a plan for that. Like I'm intending to do this plan for 3 years, right? Save your money in something or whatever. But I think meaningfully looking at something like this, the situation is going to be meaningfully different, requiring a new analysis a year from now, right? I don't know. You could probably do generalizations, but I would love to get into, some 1 year, not modeling, just looking at what this means and what it could mean. Anyway. Sorry, diatribing quite a lot. Okay, privacy. Remember that COVID app that totally didn't track you and gather your private information? Well, it kind of did. Shocker, ho, right? Who expected this? I mean, the Canadian government misleading people? No, not our Canadian government. Holly Dawn says, COVID app downloaded by 6 million Canadians is being used for data collection, says federal panel, citing worries about public, quote, trust from privacy perspective. Justin Trudeau promised users privacy fully respected when app launched in June. Yeah, anybody who expected that, I think, hasn't been paying attention. And I'm concerned that I've talked before about how Google and YouTube and Facebook and these places are kind of hand in glove with the government. So if there's no official app, I don't know that matters because they're the government, right? Google makes Android. So I don't know. But anyway, that government app is being used to harvest data to no one's surprise at all, right? Anybody paying attention is not surprised by that. Alitha Raj. Now, this didn't make sense until it did make sense completely. Okay, let's see if you guys can get there. I'll explain it at the end. Trudeau says his government's initial assessment is that Quebec can unilaterally amend the Constitution as François Legault proposed in Bill 96. And Bill 96 is French language and establishing French as the language of Quebec, blah, blah, blah. Quebec can alter the Constitution to say it's a nation and French is its official language. That's the specifics of the constitutional amendment they want to make. So they say, yep, no problem, says Trudeau. Bloc Québécois offers to work with Liberals to shut down debate and pass Bill C-10 before summer. Oh, right. Okay, that's why. Makes sense, right? François Legault negotiated with Trudeau. Trudeau found the dancing partner. He found what they wanted. It was a Quebec-centric thing. Trudeau could get behind that, right? Bingo, bango, bongo. Here you go, right? You've got Bill C-10. You've got CRTC, governance of the internet. We've got a Great Wall of Canada internet protections, right? Can't wait. I can't wait to see what happens, right? I can't wait to see if the CRTC will modify my content at all. I'll report it to you because that's what I do, right? That's what I'm going to do. And I mean, I wonder if they regulate email sends. I wonder if they regulate email marketing. I wonder if they regulate websites or podcasts, right? I wonder where the limits of this are. So, but doesn't that make a little bit more sense now? When this first popped out, like when this came out yesterday, not that it wasn't quite clear, but then this kind of dropped a little bit later, and I was like, oh, I get it. I get it. I see how this game is played, everyone. And I mean, it's not like it's hidden. It's all over the headlines. Just people just don't connect it, usually, I guess. And maybe I'm wrong. That's my opinion, right? Here are two church stories, neither one centering on Pastor Pulowski or Mr. Hildebrandt or the Church of God or Grace Life or anything. This is very, very concerning, the expansion of this and the singularity with which one religion is being represented. Are these the only churches that are meeting in defiance of the lockdown orders? Really? Are you sure? There's no other religions at all in Ontario? Because there are quite a lot of religions in Ontario. There are quite a lot of religions across Canada. You are free to worship in your own way in Canada, right? So there's not one belligerent Buddhist church? I don't temple? I'm not sure. Not one? Not one at all? Not one vocal imam who says, yeah, we're going to get together for whatever? Not one Hindu, I don't know, I'm sorry, leader who's gathering their flock as well, gathering their group. I'm sorry, I don't know the terms, but I'm not meaning to be disrespectful. Not one in Ontario. The only ones across Canada are Christian pastors. Isn't that odd? Isn't that strange? You'd think that everybody would feel the constraints of this charter violating order, right? Like you'd think that there would be people who ignored it, even just culturally, just saying, well, like, yeah, you guys can do that, but we're not going to do that, right? And it's interesting that the enforcement is where it is. Notable in Canada. Okay, here we go. Calgary pastor Tim Stevens of Fairview Baptist Church will be released from jail after a court hearing Tuesday, according to the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. Isn't that interesting? Right, so he was arrested on Sunday for preaching, I guess, for violating the health orders, and they said you're in what's the word? Hold on. Contempt of court. Sometimes as soon as I hit pause, it pops into my head. Contempt of court. You're contempt of court. You're violating these orders, and so you'll be arrested. So he's out of jail, so that's good. So I'm glad to see that it's not a lengthy prison sentence like for Pastor Coates when he was in jail in Alberta for preaching. In Nova Scotia, the RCMP have issued a fine of $11,622.50 to the Weston Christian Fellowship Church, alongside fines of $2,422 to 7 complicit churchgoers. There's no other religions across the country that are defying these orders, just Christian ones. Interesting. Is that believable? Is that plausible, do you think? I don't know. This is something I've been talking about since the pandemic began. The City of Toronto, or CTV News, City News, is reporting, the report said, fatal opiate overdoses in Ontario surged during pandemic. Now, in Guelph, I was talking about how up until like the end of December, we had more opium overdoses in Guelph and deaths from opium than we did coronavirus. And I was saying, how can we be shut down for this? How can that be a responsible response? How can we continue with having a safe injection site and funding this safe injection site when the safe injection site resulted in a 100% increase in deaths? How can that be if you did that in the private sector, we had a 100% increase in negative outcomes, and your policy is to blame, you would stop the policy or you would lose your job, right? Like, this is not an insignificant amount of money. We're providing drugs to opium addicts to stop the stigma, and they're dying. What's the stigma for dying? Like, it's incredible. I can't imagine this is a good idea. And the same thing is happening in Toronto too. And I don't think Toronto's had more COVID deaths than 2,000, I think, hasn't it? I'm going to check. Hold on. So as of April 25th, it surpassed 3,000 in Toronto. So it's not quite more opium deaths than COVID deaths. But the report said that 2,050 people died of opiate overdoses between March 2020 and December last year, compared to 1,162 people in the same period. It's interesting that they leave out the COVID numbers, which are above 3,000, to compare. Isn't it interesting that we shut down society for COVID, and that 2/3 of the people, 2/3 of the numbers died of opium? Like 2,000 people died of opium, 3,000 people plus, but not quite 4,000, I suppose, died of COVID, or with COVID, or with. I would love to see the age stratification. I would love to see the years lost and what's more costly, right? I would love to see what's more impactful. How many more years lost? Is it the opium overdoses of 2,000 people, or is it the COVID deaths of 3,000, right? I don't know. Rapid testing. Rocco Rossi, and he is a CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, so he represents businesses as well. I don't like this push for rapid testing. I don't like the idea of farming out your health status to a test all the time for being able to participate in society. I think that that's a very, very bad place to go. I think that that's not helpful. I don't think that that is something that is making people safer or making society better. I think that fundamentally it creates a two-tiered society of people who are able to get these tests and whatever, or businesses that are able to use this. Using stuff like this is hard, right? It's not easy. Using money is hard too. Participating in society is hard. But when you put barriers up, like if you want to open a business, you have to comply with COVID restrictions. That's a whole new barrier to starting a business. If you want to go out into society, you have to comply with COVID restrictions. Now there are people who have anxiety because they can't go to chapters because their daughter or son is autistic and they can't put a mask on. And so chapters will get rid of them. But chapters has the toys. You're in a catch-22, right? And chapters has some toys. You can go to Walmart, I suppose. But it is folly to think that this makes people safer or happier or better. All that has happened, the result of all of this, has been division and separation, and suspicion has been increased. We have destroyed our social cohesion for this, and for no measurable improvement. Like, what's the improvement? Everybody's being locked in their homes, and what we cut some CO2 emissions by a couple of percentage points for a little while. What's the improvement? Where's the positive value proposition here? Why am I going to do this? Anyway, Rocco Rossi says, rapid testing making an enormous difference in Nova Scotia and breaking chain of transmission. More evidence of why we, Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and our chambers across Ontario are so proud to be able to distribute free rapid tests to SMEs in so many communities. I think that even accessing a program like that is difficult and a barrier to functioning as a business, right? We'll do this, and then we'll go into the redacted portion of the show. Reopening. So the Reopening Ontario Act has done a good job at shutting Ontario down completely. If you're a business, the Reopening Ontario Act says we're in yellow or red or gray, and if it's in gray, we don't have to prove that your business is part of the reasons for transmission. We just have to tell you we're in gray, and that's enough to shut you down, right? So I said in November when the second Toronto lockdown happened. So just to give you a refresher, in October, Toronto went into a lockdown and shut down the small businesses, the restaurants, and the gyms. And the small businesses, the restaurants, and the gyms basically I think they got a lawyer, and they launched back against the government saying, like, you haven't proven that our places are part of the transmission problem. There's no transmission in our, we've worked really hard to comply, spent money. It's hard, right? They spent money to comply with this, and then they get screwed by being closed because the government said they had to be closed. The government's goal was to stop movement. They didn't want to have to prove that these places contributed to the spread. And so they opened it up in October. And then they came out with a color-coded system. And I said, see, they're going to use this color-coded system to not have to prove to businesses why they have to be closed. And that's exactly what they did. And we've been closed since then because they're not accountable, because they wrote the accountability out of the law, right? You see how this works. So now we're getting into a situation where we're coming into summer, and we're going to be more locked down this summer than we were last summer. But we've got 50% of the people vaccinated. I was surprised. Yesterday, I was walking out to the mailbox, and the guys were working at opening up the local splash pad. There's a splash pad near my house. And they were working at opening up the splash pad. And not that I was surprised. They opened it up last year. But I said, when are we opening? And they were, if Doug Ford lets us, it'll be June 15th. So, and they were saying it's all on Doug Ford. And I think that it's interesting how we're still focused on outdoor amenities, outdoor play, outdoor whatevers. Like we've got the playgrounds open, but we don't have basketball courts. We don't have certain other amenities open. And that's to reduce the movement, just like the gyms and all of the other stuff being closed. It's to reduce your mobility, to not give you any reasons to leave your house. But the thing is, I still don't think that stands up to charter. I don't think that you can use that motivation to get to the goal of the stated goal. And we don't have any metrics. We don't have anything to measure our success or failure by. So it's very, very, and like that's the government's job. Is your success rate how many businesses you've killed? Because man, you must be getting close soon. Anyway, Roman Baber says, PC MPPs were whipped to vote against opening outdoors. I explain what whipped means and ask Paul Calandra if it was good for kids or democracy. In response to Calandra lying, I reveal that he threatened to kick me out as early as June for opposing lockdowns. See to the end. So this is an interesting exchange, but basically that encompasses it. Mr. Baber asks his question well, and Calandra says, oh, well, the gentleman across the way voted for all these lockdowns and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, it doesn't hold much water because he doesn't agree with them now, and he says there's no reason for them now, et cetera, et cetera. So Calandra doesn't engage with Baber's question and instead tries to paint Baber with the you did this, you authorized this too brush, which I think is just like, it doesn't give credibility to the Ford government at all, really. So I don't know what this reopening Ontario thing is going to do, but they're trying to keep as much control, I think, as possible. Okay. Here's another example of this. So Cynthia Mulligan tweeted this out. She's a journalist at City News. She tweeted out, on reopening Ontario, Peter Juni from the COVID-19 Science Advisory Table believes within next week or so, outdoor activities like golf and basketball can resume. He hopes schools will open before the school year ends. As for restaurant patios, maybe by the end of June or early July. So as soon as I read that, I thought, that's doesn't make any sense, because it doesn't make any sense. And Ryan O'Connor picked up on that too. He said, Ontario Science Table maestro Peter Juni continues his group's history of hypocrisy. First, he and his groupies said that they opposed closing outdoor activities. They didn't. But even as they make this false claim, they stall on patios. More science fiction from his science table. Yeah, I mean, what a beautiful day to be sitting out on a patio, right? Like jeepers creepers, get out by a patio, have a couple of cold ones, right? Pops. Ontario is conducting, this is Doug Ford opening Ontario. Okay. Ontario is conducting a new COVID-19 safety campaign focused on warehouses, distribution centers, manufacturers, and food processing plants. About 1,500 hotspot workplaces are being visited between May 10th and 28th. Yay. Lucky us. Thanks for keeping us safe. It's garbage, right? I wouldn't let them in. Canada-US border restrictions extended another month to June 21st, says CTV. Yeah. So Justin Trudeau wants 75%. Canada will need 75% vaccination before U.S. border reopens, Trudeau suggests. Yowza, that's a very high percentage point. Is it 75% of like the adult population, or is it 75% of the population? I think kids make up 15% of the population in Ontario, so that takes us down to 85%. So 90% of adults? Wow, really? Red Sox and Bruins can host fans at full capacity beginning May 29th. Wow, so baseball's back. And so is hockey, it seems. And interesting, 2,500 fans to be allowed at Bell Centre for potential Leafs Habs Game 6. So that's Montreal. I think that's where the Bell Centre is, Montreal. And in Carolina, they've got playoff hockey, right? This is, like, that's a full house. I don't know. That was snapped in there. I don't know how you can convince people that Canada and Ontario, you know, this is the right move. Just 2 more weeks, everyone. Just 2 more weeks. Just don't question it too much. Don't look into it too much, right? Don't think about it too much. Don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe your lying ears. You know, all that stuff. Meanwhile, in Texas, right? Texas reports 0 COVID deaths 2 months after Biden calls its reopening the Neanderthal thinking. Do you remember the Neanderthal comment in the Ontario or the Canadian House of Commons? I thought that was funny too. Like, they use the same language. It's ridiculous. It's like branding or planned repeating the same terms. I'm not sure why they would do that. Okay, we're going to head over to the Redacted channel. So if you were going to stay here on YouTube, thanks for watching. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingVoicely.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. And if you're coming over to watch the rest of the show, we'll see you on Rumble, BitChute, or Odysee.